Tonight on PM Express, contract for sale, suspension of PPA boss enough, and you've been following the issues. The suspended chief executive of the PPA is to report on Thursday, that's tomorrow, to the special prosecutor over allegations of corruption and conflict of interest. And if you've been monitoring the documentary put together by Anas Arimeo Anas, there were some revelations in there in the contract for sale documentary by investigative journalist Manasseh Azore Awene, I beg your pardon. And the invitation by the special prosecutor is the latest in a number of actions triggered after the broadcast of that documentary. Let's look at the reaction from the presidency. First, you recall the PPA boss Ejenimeje was suspended through a statement issued by the presidency. Then it was followed by a letter to both Charge and the Office of the Special Prosecutor for investigations. All of that signed by Communications Director Eugene Ahen. Now, civil society, and these are the fallouts from the actions and reactions coming from the presidency against this documentary put together by Manasseh Azore Awene. Now, civil society group Citizen Ghana Movement wants the PPA boss to resign from his post. That's not all they want. They want more. They also want the PPA board dissolved. Now, we listened to Charge boss this afternoon, Joseph Whittal, who hints the commission will invite others in addition to the PPA boss. We'll be watching out for this and see who will be helping in the investigation by Charge. Now, let's look at some facts here, the facts that were brought to bear by the documentary by Manasseh Azore Awene. And first, Ejeni Mboating was appointed in March 2017. That's an obvious fact. His company, Talent Discovery Limited, was established in June 2017, and Manasseh Azore Awene checked this with the Registrar General. Now, the company, per Manasseh's investigations, wins and has been shortlisted for many government contracts. And the method used has always been restrictive tendering. We have the PPA, president of the Procurement Association of Ghana, in the studio tonight. He will be explaining to us what this restrictive tendering is all about and whether there's been any breach of the Procurement Act and the Code of Ethics. Now, this means that the PPA CEO, who is also 60% shareholder as well as director of Talented Discovery Limited, gets to work on the approval for the restrictive tendering. And this is where the danger is. The PPA boss, Ejeni Mboating, however, says he made disclosure to the PPA board. This means that whenever he was going to approve anything, he made some disclosure to the board. And that's why people are calling for the board to also be investigated due to the documentary. But the due diligence team works under the PPA boss. So you just can tell that if the due diligence team works under the PPA board, there could be some influence there. And the question has been, is the suspension of the PPA boss enough? That's what we'll be interrogating tonight on PM Express. Stick and stay with us. My guest in the studio, Collins Ajiman Sapon, is president of Ghana Institute of Procurement and Supply, and Michael Bwedi is also fundraising manager. He's with the Ghana Integrity Initiative. Good to see you, gentlemen. Let me start with you, Michael, and I'd like to gauge your mood on the documentary because I know you have watched, and also to find out how or why the GII decided to fund this, because I know the GII and the Media Foundation for West Africa funded this investigation, and not others.
Well, let me say that, well, good evening to your viewers. Let me say that we gave support. We gave support because, I mean, over the years, we have, many people in civil society had done a lot of talking, and it was about time we walked the talk. The Occupied Ghana showed the way. They took up case to court, and today the country is being saved a lot of resources by virtue of the court action that Occupy Ghana undertook. So it shows that, well, civil society can do a lot more than talking, and Ghana Integrity Initiative believes that, well, it's about time we also show some action. We had always said that the political establishment or the leadership of the country are not doing enough by way of fighting corruption. How else can anybody else do enough than to act? And that was the motivation behind supporting Manasseh with regards to this.
But why the PPA? Did you have hints of any rot in there or something like that?
To be honest with you, no.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, when we got involved, we didn't even know who the personalities were.
Where?
All that we heard of is that contracts were being sold. It begged our thoughts as to the legitimacy of such actions, and therefore we thought that it was good to look into it. If we had looked into it and everything was done above board, that's fine. That would have been fine. But insofar as it smacked of some unlawfulness, we thought that it was a good idea to go deeper and deeper, and that's what we did.
So how does the findings of the documentary come across to you?
I think that in order not to judge, particularly now that the various competent authorities are looking into it, we say that ordinarily looking at the documentary, we feel uncomfortable for now. We feel very uncomfortable with what we found, you know, because you see, if you understand the rationale behind setting up the PPA,
yeah,
you know, the first object is to ensure that, you know, procurement is done above board, judicially saves the state resources, etc. Now,
I remember there have been calls for that.
Exactly. So now, if the gatesman in itself, it's perceived to be joining the looters, then it's worrying. So for us, ordinarily, we feel very worried and uncomfortable. We are hoping that we can do a lot more investigation. But as the program progresses, we will discuss what other things that we think should be done.
Let me get to you, Collins. And have you watched the video?
Yes, please.
What are your preliminary observations?
Well, we are not happy. I mean, that something like that is happening to our profession. So when I saw it on Thursday morning, because early morning around 4 a.m. I started getting calls. I did not have the opportunity to watch it the previous, that's the Wednesday. So Thursday morning I started getting calls. Then I had to put on my data and download it from the net and watch. In fact, when I watched, I wasn't happy. I was hurt. Let me say we were hurt, but we knew that there would be more to it, whether what we were watching is the truth or not. So when we wake up, we started calling ourselves the executives, the council members and all. So from afternoon up to about 7 p.m., we were locked in the meeting, trying to think of what are we going to do as an institute. And I think after our long meeting, we came out with the statement that we issued on Thursday evening.
Interesting, but if you hear issues like a company belonging to the PPA boss, in fact, having a huge percentage in there, and also being a director of that company, winning so many of government contracts, and then also through restrictive tendering, which is normally approved by the PPA boss himself, then, I mean, you start getting worried. Tell me about the PPA Code of Ethics first, before I talk about the Act. But the Code of Ethics, I know one of the reasons it was launched was to check some of these things. What are the do's and don'ts of the Code of Ethics, and which part of the Code of Ethics has been flouted?
Well, the Code of Ethics is my institute, that Ghana Institute of Procurement and Supply, and he is a senior member. So when we were launching, he did the launching for us. When you look at code number 13, it talks of our code of ethics. It talks about conflict of interest. And if there's time, you permit me to read what is in there. That is where what we saw mimics. We can't now is going through investigation, so I believe no individual or an institution can make a conclusive statement that he's breached or he's erred unless we finish the investigation. But it mimics conflict of interest, and it say that everybody should be responsible once you have a capacity, and you have to exercise duty of care in identifying, assessing, and managing possible conflict of interest, whether actual or issues which could be viewed as conflicts.
Okay.
That may arise in my daily working life, rejecting any business practices which might reasonably be deemed improper.
Okay.
Then from there, another one says, never using my authority or position for financial gain. It goes further, declaring my personal interests to my employer, also making sure that the information that you give during your work shouldn't be misleading, and also always have to be fair and transparent and be truthful about your skill, experience, and qualification and all. So what we saw mimics this, a breach of this.
Okay.
But however, like...
So it states clearly that there shouldn't be a situation of conflict of interest.
Yes. So when it is there, or there will be something that even if you are right, you are right, you've recused yourself, you've done what you're supposed to do, still, it can be stretched in an argument. So when you are in a position of authority, you need to be guided. However, looking at what we saw, let us, the institute we've come up, we are writing to him, we'll give him a time to meet our Ethics and Professional Standard Committee.
Okay, you haven't done that yet?
Not yet, because a letter, I know a letter had been signed. It will be sent to him.
It's been almost a week since the documentary was showed.
We got it on Thursday, and Thursday evening we issued our statement. And we had this Friday. Remember, yesterday was Monday, and I know the letter is ready and is going to go.
When are you
in our constitution, the member need to have at least a framework of about 14 days.
That is after he's received the letter. When is he receiving the letter?
Hopefully by tomorrow he'll receive it.
Okay.
So from there we'll start counting the 14 days for him to appear. Then from there we are also writing to Manasseh to get a copy
of the documentary.
Because we cannot just pick what is on the net. We need to make everything. Then from there, they will call him or he will come, because we need to give him the opportunity to respond to the issues found in the video. Because for all you know, he's not the one. Let's put it that way. So after, we will also come out with our findings as our constitution prescribes.
I will come back to the Procurement Act, which is not actually managed by your outfit. I mean, for the Code of Conduct and Ethics, it's probably you brought it up, and so you have some say in there. But for the Procurement Act, it's a national thing, and people who breach it, there should be a sanction regime. I'll come back to that, but let me engage Michael. The Auditor General, Daniel Domelevo, this week expressed shock at the revelations from this documentary, and he questioned the internal auditing of the PPA. Have you also had cause to question the internal audit of the PPA?
Well, I think that we have cause to question systems and how the systems function, and our capacity or ability to flout rules or abuse rules. I mean, so the internal audit is one, but of many institutions. In fact, if you look at the various entities that brought those procurement requests to the PPE, the rationale behind choosing a particular method of procurement and not the other are all issues for questioning, are all issues that beats people's thinking, because the law is very clear on what qualifies one to choose one particular procurement method over the other, particularly in the case of the restricted tender. The law is very clear on the basis for which you will use restricted tender. I don't believe that all the 14 procurement that involved the TLD passes for any of those prescriptions that the law prescribes. So what informed the decision for the procurement entity or the entity tender committee to even forward and request for restrictive tender? Beats anyone's imagination.
It beats everybody's imagination.
So the issue is that there are just a whole gamut of institutional and procedural failure that we gloss over. This thing had gone on over and over. And it will interest us all to know that it looks like practically all the problematic procurement had all gone through either it's a restricted tender, sole sourcing, or any of the exceptional procurement method.
Yep.
You know, the default is a competitive tender.
Yeah.
But for some reason, you may opt or request for approval to use restricted tender or not. But it looks like almost all the problematic
went through restricted tendering.
Exactly. And why is that? Is what beats anybody else's imagination. And so after all these questionable selection of method, if it comes out that, oh wow, ultimately there are other ulterior motive, then but you see, I've been saying that it is not for nothing that the first function of the office of the special prosecutor was to investigate and prosecute procurement-related corruption. Yeah. It means that it's a problem in this country.
Of course, we've established that.
It's a huge problem in this country. So why is it that it is still persisting to the extent that now even the head, or I say the gatesman, is
you tell me, because you at GII do a lot of research into this. Why is it still persistent?
System failure. Simple. We just have system failures in our country. So you see, we have the laws. We pretend to be implementing the laws, and somehow, anyhow, people who seems to know more about the various regulations look out for gaps in the system or in the regulations and take advantage of it. And even when they are caught, it doesn't look like we have cracked the whip enough to deter people. So if you look at the fight against corruption, one of the critical things is to ensure that we prevent corruption. We are not doing enough to prevent corruption. We are doing a lot of lip servicing, a lot of talking, and a lot of pretense, in our quest to fight corruption. So people are not afraid. If you read the Anti-Corruption Action Plan, the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan, it says that we must make corruption a high risk and a low gain venture. But we've turned it the other way around. It has become a high gain and a low risk. Okay. And so everybody who gets the slightest opportunity wants to explore it.
Well, that's one of the issues we'll be talking about, because even with this steps taken by the president, asking Shraj and the Office of the Special Prosecutor to investigate the matter, there seemed to be low confidence in what this will yield, whether it will yield positive results. But let's get back to the Daniel Domelevu, who already says he's also probing into several issues, including the PPA issues, even before this documentary came out. And he says he suspects that this whole contract is, is masked with fraud and corruption, because internal auditing, is zero in this.
He is the Auditor General. Internal auditing at PPA or at the various procurement entities?
At PPA, because he says that if internal auditing was no, it was apt, then some of these things could be checked even before it gets
I
to
believe maybe he's referring to the procurement entities, but not PPA.
Okay.
Your PPA technically is not a procuring entity; it's a regulator.
Okay.
And what we've heard is not that PPA was going to award a contract by themselves.
Okay.
And they took it and sold it.
Okay.
But rather, when you watch the video, the contract were obtained or secured from other procurement entities for which some names were given, the Ministry of Education and all that.
Okay.
So maybe that is where he's referring that if the internal audits were part of the procurement process at the entity levels, maybe some of these things would
have come up. But the fact that all of these were done through restrictive tendering, which means that the PPA boss was the one approving of this, and he says he disclosed everything to the board, the PPA board. But again, the due diligence team works under the PPA boss.
You see, restricted tendering, single sourcing, is a method in the law. So we keep on saying that it is not wrong to apply restricted tendering at the various procurement entities.
Okay.
Okay. Here, the alleged company had this contract from the various procurement entities, not from PPA. So when you watch it, it means that the procurement entities, like the ministries that they mention they will come and request for approval for the application of either the restricted or single source. So that was what happened. And when you watch it, it's like, okay, you are a member of the board, but you approve this restricted tendering. Okay. And the man said, I recuse myself
from it.
And there are minutes there to show. Yes, you see, that is why, as an institute, we don't want to stretch some of these things, because we need to go in to see, because even how to declare the conflict, there's a format. Yeah. You don't just talk to a member of the board or the chairman just to say that, oh, chairman, I'm not attending, or I'm not joining the discussion on this subject because I have interest in this organization. There should be some form filling, signing and all. So when we get in there, we will know the truth, whether it was really done and whether even the formats for which were used to declare was the right way. Are you getting? Okay. So the Auditor General talking about the internal auditors being absent, I think maybe it is for him to fix, because some of us have worked in some organizations where we have internal auditors where before a payment is even done, you need to see their green pen before payment is done. So I believe he's referring to the procurement entity, whether they have the internal auditors.
Let's get into the Public Procurement Act, 2003, Act 633. Yeah. And it talks about when you can use competitive tendering. Yes. It talks about when you can request to use restrictive tendering. Yeah. Tell me about it, and where, per the investigation by Manasseh Azoriah-Winnie, where the PPA boss could be faulted.
Well, when it comes to restricted tendering, I think we need to separate the PPA, what has happened, from the application of the restricted tendering. Okay. Because it is the procurement entity. Let me explain this. Please, procurement entity may be, we heard of Ministry of Education. Yeah. So now Ministry of Education is a procurement entity. Exactly. They have a need for a particular item or a contract or construction. All right. And they think that we have limited, okay, you can apply restricted tendering when you have limited number of suppliers or contractors or consultants within that space.
Okay.
In terms of that, in relation to the item that you want to buy.
Okay.
Or the time that you need to get the item in. So let's say there is an urgent need for a particular drug, Ebola drug. You wake up this morning and you have an outbreak.
Okay.
You cannot go through national competitive tendering where you need to advertise 2 weeks, get almost all the money.
So, I mean, there's an emergency.
Coming.
So
it's
when there's an emergency.
So when it happens like that, you can say, okay, we know of these 3 pharmaceutical, let's write to them.
Okay.
But that is where the law says that when you are writing to these limited suppliers, you need to come and seek approval.
Okay.
Before you can do
approval from where?
PPA.
Okay.
Within that industry or market, or there's an emergency need, okay, for the item, then you can apply restricted tendering. So now, let's say Ministry of Education need books with open school or food for the children with open school, and we need to get them eating.
I mean, so, certainly you would have to go through restrictive. Because there's the urgent need for that thing. So that's what the law says.
Yes.
In this case, where all the contracts that, I mean, through his company went through restrictive tendering, I mean, was there the need for that?
That is where the investigation need to establish whether really there was a need for the procurement entity, not PPE. I want us to draw the line. Whether the procurement entity really had to apply restricted. That one, the investigation will bring it out.
Okay.
Then they will look at the item, construction, is it item and all that. So it came to PPA. PPA approved it. And that is where they are saying the name of his company came up there. And we also heard in the video that he said he recused himself from the discussion of that. So when you look at that technical aspect, you need to do that investigation before you can now draw a conclusion that it is wrong for him to even use his company to apply and all that.
Okay. So be it as it may, the PPA boss is scheduled to meet the special prosecutor tomorrow, Thursday at 10 a.m. Your boss is the chairperson for the special prosecutors board. What are your expectations?
Well, I think that for the purposes of this investigation, my boss has no hand. They don't get involved in the day-to-day. As a matter of fact, the Special Prosecutors Act makes it clear that nobody influences or can control how the Special Prosecutor does its day-to-day investigation. So the board chair has no hand in the day-to-day investigation. But I think that you asked the question as to whether those contracts or the contracts in question fits the requirement for restrictive tendering. The law makes it clear, and I'm not too sure whether we need to stretch it. Yes, if you look at Section 38(1) of the law, it talks about
Public Procurement
Act as amended. It says that if by reason of a highly complex and specialized nature, if time and cost required to examine and evaluate large numbers of tender, if an order for competitive tender fails to receive any response after publication, the authority may charge a processing fee as determined. Now, these 3 criteria, how would you tell me that construction of drainage, how complex is construction of drainage, and how specialized is it? How urgent is it? Construction of a school or a building, you know? So I'm not too sure. Well, I mean, we just need to call a spade a spade. I'm thinking on this score, I believe strongly the law.
I mean, it
there
did
was
not
something
fit
onto what beyond, you know, the reasons that could be cited. I don't think we need to stretch it at all. I seriously believe that those contracts does not fit these.
the
The
requirements
this is what
the Public
exactly,
Procurement
that's what
Act.
the law says.
You
So
wanted to react to that?
Well, not. Once he has said that there may be something,
Okay.
so that is why, as an institute, we are a bit quiet on that because, yes, not
But
defending.
why quiet if the law states categorically? Why quiet?
Yes, so not to hold brief for anybody, but recently you heard this LECMA thing. A bridge, maybe last night, car can pass, but we wake up and there's flood. The bridge had caved in,
Okay.
so nobody can cross and go. It's a bridge,
Okay.
but it's now become an emergency.
It's become
to fix
an
it
emergency. But looking at the findings of the documentary,
the documentary,
were there ever...
Exactly. It begs it because according to the same documentary, the project was supposed to start at a particular time.
Yep.
For some reason, it had been delayed for a month.
So this cannot qualify
does it
as an
fit into
emergency
Asa, we are using the documentary
as a
to
yardstick.
conclude
Okay.
and come out
We are not
with a
concluding.
verdict
Yeah.
of
I mean,
what.
if
so
you
what,
go per the findings of the investigation, then you certainly can say that it did not fit the requirement
But
of the act.
I agree. But here, the president of the land, in its own wisdom, thought that, look, we've watched a video.
Yeah.
Why can't we make conclusive statement, then the president will call the IGP to go and arrest the person and say that go to auditor, attorney general, prosecute him today.
I'll come to that.
No, I'm coming.
Okay.
I'm coming. So he didn't do that, but he called for investigation into the matter.
And it's one of the issues we are battling with.
So as an institute, that is why we have also triggered our process to go into it before we make conclusive statement, because everything is an alleged
by the documentary.
So
you want a conclusive statement from the investigation
and from our
body.
institution, we will all come out with, because everything that may be there, somebody may have an answer to
There's
it.
no problem with that. But one issue we've also had to deal with is the fact that it appears a large section of the public do not have any confidence in this investigation. You may have seen some cartoons going around actually describing the presidency as a clearing agent where public officials put themselves in these kinds of mess, and then the president calls for one investigation or the other, comes out and say they've been exonerated, they didn't play, and then maybe either promotes them and all of that. I'll take a break on PM Express. When we come back, we'll be interrogating this. Stay with us. We're live on PM Express with me, Aisha Ibrahim. Many thanks for sticking with us. And before I went on that break, I was talking about how a section of the public do not even believe in this whole investigation. Would you blame people who suggest that this investigation or are skeptical about the fact that it won't yield any positive results, considering the history, what we have seen over the years or over the period? People commit A or B or misconduct themselves, public officers, and then sometimes we don't even get to see the investigation. We don't even get to see the outcome, but we're only told that those people have been exonerated. Michael?
I think we can't blame people who are probably, let me say, overly anxious about this case. It is not just because of recent happenings, but it's just because of the whole country's history of how we had fought corruption. If you look at even just within the Fourth Republic, governments come in and we have perceived. So is described as the over-enthusiastic approach to fighting corruption, where we chase people into churches and, you know, haul people before court. So the general expectation of people is that the approach will be more, you know, forceful, more. They are not getting that. But you know, we have also failed as a people to educate the public about why there is a need to use due process, and that due process is more sustainable than the over-enthusiastic approach that we had used in the past.
Okay.
We haven't done that very well. Worst of it all, we have also not allowed information to flow easily and voluntarily. So
who would you blame for that?
Every one of us. Everybody who is mandated to fight corruption, who has the legal backing to fight corruption, who had not made information flow, or who had failed to discharge its public education function is guilty of what we are talking about. It is this failure to engage the public consistently is what had given rise to the over-anxious, you know, and the perceived impatience of the public to see action. You remember that when the president, I think, was inaugurating the board of the special prosecutor, talked about, you know, now, you know, people are going to see action.
In fact, we all thought that the special prosecutor's office was a panacea
2 years
to
down
all
the
our
road,
problems
people are not
when
seeing
we
action.
talk about corruption.
In all fairness, it is not because the special prosecutor is not doing anything, but the special prosecutor is not discharging its mandate of engaging the public and informing the public, educating the public.
And it says it's not, it's under-resourced also.
Well, you see, the under-resource is one thing, but fulfilling all your mandate or fulfilling your mandate is another thing. You may be under-resourced, far willing to be engaging to be doing investigation as the public is expected. But you see, anytime we had heard from the special prosecutor, it had been one complaint.
We haven't seen much from that office.
What ideally we're expecting the special prosecutor to do is, if you cannot even do it yourself, engage people, CSOs, the NCC and the likes, to begin to explain to the public how your law, your functions, how you operate,
which the special prosecutor relied on before it begins operation. That ally is in now.
We're ongoing. Yeah. I'm sure people would have appreciated the due processes that the special prosecutor would have to take issues. That is not happening. You understand? So you can't blame people for thinking that it will not amount to nothing. I am hoping that the various entities who had been charged or who are investigating this issue will do more. I mean, isn't it surprising that we are only getting to hear about the work that the Auditor General and the Special Prosecutor are doing with regards to auditing contracts?
But for Manasseh's documentary.
Meanwhile, it was ongoing. I'm saying that, look, the state agencies are doing a lot, but why are they failing to carry the public along with them with regards to what they are doing? I don't understand. Yeah. I mean, recently Yoko held a public forum and told people quite a bit of other things, and it was refreshing to know that, you know. But until recently, what has Yoko been doing? Nobody hears about them. The only time you hear about Yoko is when somebody is reporting, and if not even just somebody, when political exposed persons are reporting to Yoko, then you hear something about Yoko in the news. But they are doing quite a lot. Which the public must know. Which the public must know. Yeah. They are not carrying the public along with them. And that's, for me, is a problem. CSOs are there to help. Yeah. But
they are not engaging them enough. On Thursday, and I said tomorrow is Wednesday, on Thursday, 10 a.m., the PPA boss is meeting the special prosecutor. What are your expectations?
Well, we want everything to be done faster because, and I know the public outcry is as a result of the continuous bastardization of procurement practice in the country. Almost every week, there is some
which you also have questioned.
Some negative issues within the procurement arena. And therefore, we want speedy look at all that, because look, even within the private sector and there's that perception of corruption in procurement processes. And therefore, we wish that the OSP, the SHRAD, and all the investigative bodies that the president had invited them to look at, they will also look at it, and they should come out fast, so that, yes, even if there's that perception of corruption within the procurement sector, and people see that, look, something happened, and within few days, we've been swift about how to handle it. Anybody wanting to perpetuate the same thing will now think twice that, hey, if I do anything, some people will find me out. So we are in support of all the investigative organizations for them to do their work, and it should be fast. It should be fast, so that it will also erode the perception that when investigation comes up or is called, nothing comes out of it. But we wish that this one, being a very big issue, we should be able to conclude it, and it should be fast.
Yeah. The PPA board has indicated its preparedness to assist in investigations. Yes. And of course, there's been many calls for the PPA board to also be investigated. In fact, with the Citizen Ghana movement, they want the board dissolved. What's your stance on this?
Now, this issue came up. One person had been named. Yes, he was sitting on the board. Can you imagine you dissolve the board today? What support is the board going to offer to the investigative bodies?
Okay.
But during the process of investigation, certain things may come up. And the investigated may even recommend the dissolution of the board or any other thing. So I will, and our body, our institute, is the issue had come, let us investigate. And this time around, let us all give the necessary support so that the investigation will go on well. When we wait for a month, 2 months, nothing is coming up, there should be another trigger to ask of it. But you two, I will say that the media, 1 week, 2 weeks, is gone down.
We should follow up.
So there should be that follow-up so that we all bring amicable solution or conclusion to
this matter. But let me take you to the Public Procurement Act 2003, Act 663.
Yes.
And if you look at the functions of the board, and that is Section 3. Section 3A, okay, Section 3C talks about in furtherance of its object, the board shall perform the following functions.
Yes.
And okay, if you come to C, it talks about develop draft rules, instructions, and other regulatory dimensions. But let's move forward to 4. It says to monitor and supervise public procurement and ensure compliance with statutory requirements. Yes. And with this provision, you still think the PPA board should be left to operate as it is?
If you stretch this, when we talk of statutory requirements, and you were going to read the C, but you did not finish. Develop draft rules, instructions, other regulatory documentation on public procurement and format for public procurement documentation and all. There are some we call standard tender documents. There are manuals, there are instructions, there are regulations that have been developed.
But I'm particularly concerned about the D part.
Yes.
To monitor and supervise
public procurement and ensure compliance with statutory authorities.
Would you exonerate the board from this scandal?
The board usually I'm not speaking for the board, but I'm here. So
Oh, definitely.
the board usually will approve the procurement process according to the requirement of the law. Okay? So the board, and in the law, like section 38 and all, it will tell you that if you want to deliver this, this is the procedure you need to go. So go for restricted tendering, write to PPA for approval. Single source, write to PPA for approval. Sole source, write to PPA for approval.
Okay.
National competitive tendering, this is how the procedure should go.
Okay.
Advertise in this, open in public and all that.
But even more importantly, the PPA board disclosed that he made disclosure to the board.
Yes, there's conflict of interest. If you look at the Constitution 284, I think that one talks about conflict of interest. And it tells the public officials that, and when I read mine, it tells the public officials that if you have any interest, you disclose. So technically, they said he disclosed and he recused himself from that.
Okay.
And in my other submission, I said that when the investigation takes place, that is where you see whether even the disclosure, was it even verbal?
Okay.
Was it documented?
Okay, so
was it
you
captured
think that
in the minutes?
you think that we should just leave this section D of section 3 of the Act? We should just let it lie and wait for the investigation before we can draw conclusions.
Sure.
You agree?
No, I don't. I don't, because you see, I don't think that just disclosure is enough.
That is, I'm coming. I did not complete myself.
Okay, complete.
They said I disclose and recuse myself.
Okay.
Disclosure is not just by word of mouth. There's a procedure. Now we've not seen how the disclosure
was done.
But even Manasseh said he requested for the board minutes. He's yet to receive it.
Okay.
So for all you know, there's nothing in the board minutes.
Okay.
You wouldn't.
So
you can't conclude.
So you
okay,
think that the PPA board has not been caught by the D part of the section 3?
The supervision here is to the entities.
Okay.
Okay. Have they done the documentation for public procurement entities to go through? Do we apply for restricted tendering, single sourcing? Are we doing that? So the supervision is not about a board member or a CEO going to do his private business using his whatever. Are you getting the point? So for now, I would say let the investigation start. Then we ask some of these questions. But you dissolve tomorrow. Okay, it's been dissolved. So all the individuals on the PPA board are now going to be investigated to say that they were on the board and somebody recused himself and therefore they shouldn't have approved. We need to go down to take some of these issues to come out with a conclusive.
Okay. Briefly, Michael, you wanted to make a point there.
I think, you see, there are also more to it than just the disclosure. I don't think that, you see, I think that one of the things that it will be interesting to know as the investigation proceeds is to what extent did, even though he may so-called have disclosed his influence, inform the decision that we're taking.
Okay.
It's a question that one ought to know, because you see, you can disclose and then walk away, but you are one of us, so let's take care of our own. It's a possibility. I'm not saying that is what happened, but perhaps investigation will establish. But even more worrying,
and I mentioned
even more worrying, if you look at the act itself, it tells about the qualification that the board must bring, a board member must have.
Yeah.
It talks about it should be one that is competent, so it talks about their skill, etc. But is it more importantly, it talks about the fact that they should be experienced in public procurement. Now, just suppose that to their profiles, the board members, the profiles that they have at the website from the board chairman. It's all enumerates a list of academic qualifications.
Yeah.
But very silent. It is, in fact, loudly silent on their experience
in
public
procurement.
procurement.
This is an issue that will be quite interesting to monitor as the week go by. And on Thursday, when the PPA boss meets the special prosecutor, it's something that we are watching keenly. A number of questions we'll be seeking answers to. And when that happens, then we can draw our own conclusion. I'm grateful for your time. Collins Ajiman Sapon is the president of the Ghana Institute of Procurement and Supply. Michael Boedi is fundraising manager. My name is Aisha Barry. Many thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of our programs.